Okay, greetings everyone. Um, we have a new topic today, and it's about market research. Um, I wanted to take a very practical approach yet again. I guess the main reason for that is because I heard a lot of positive feedback from people that are this kind of practical approach is, can I say, like understandable, uh, not maybe more understandable, but it's understandable format of showing some topics and explaining some topics and such. So yet again, I'm gonna be showing a very practical approach in the given topic, which is the market research. Instead of showing the, let's say, the generic uh, let's say, or having a generic lesson of market research, I wanted to reserve a moment and try to explain how I do market research for my games. But obviously, because we only have 1 hour, it's pretty hard to try and explain everything. So I tried to wrap this up in a more understandable and simple format that you can actually get something out from this, rather than just a lot of confusement. So shipping on Steam each month how to market research. My example approach. And the intention of this given presentation is to provide practical example how to approach market research on Steam. And I like to underline that practical because this is gonna be very practical. I'm gonna show like how I did market research for my game 6. So I'm gonna be starting my sixth game in a week or such to build that. So I'm already digging into the market research part. So what kind of a game I should be making, and I think I've made my selection already. So I'm gonna explain the reasoning for that. So I guess that is the best way of explaining the topic is by showing how I pick my games or to be developed games. In case you have any questions and such, we have currently 15 people in the 16 people in the audience, so you can ask anything you like. By the way, I should open the chat right now. Where is the button for that? There it is. So I'm gonna put that on the second screen so I can actually react if you say something. But yeah, you can ask any questions you like during the presentation. There's not too many of us, although the amount of people is growing all the time. Now it's 17. So in case you have questions, you can drop the message on the chat, and I can answer to that as soon as I notice it. Okay, cool. So let's get forward. The main points for this presentation are there. So we need a commercially healthy genre. The genre needs to be something that has a demand. Evergreen genres tend to be highly competitive. Following trends, and are we able to ship on time? And data gives us the direction, not the outcome. Those are basically the topics, and those may look, let's say, odd at this point, but once we go forward, I'm pretty sure that you start to understand what I mean with these. But the first half or such of this presentation is mostly just explaining the, let's say, the problem that we have when doing market research for our game development, and the other half is the explaining how I did market research for my game 6. So market research, it's often taken as a dry topic, like something that you need to be explaining to someone that our core audience is 35-year-old male who has a car and lives in this and this kind of area and such. No. For games, I guess you can do that as well as a market research, but I'm yet again explaining my own reasoning why and how I do the market research, and I actually find it pretty fun because there's so many options that you can pick and so much of data you can digest and try to understand how the things work and such. And because obviously and ultimately there is no one explanatory to anything in market research that you can just read a recipe how to make a successful game and just make it. I guess a lot of people would be doing that if that would be the case. So there is a lot of data and such that you need to kind of interpret yourself and try to understand and make your own assumptions. What is the best resolution for this problem and such. So to put it in a nutshell, it's always a question mark. No one knows what is the right choice, but we can do market research and try to understand better the player base of some specific genre as an example, and try to understand like why this is good decision that we're going to be making and such. So I actually personally find it pretty fun, and hopefully you will as well after this presentation if you are not already having fun with your market research efforts. Okay, so the numbers and data are basically the ones that everyone thinks when we mention the word market research. The numbers and data are obviously important and direct a lot of the decisions, or should be directing a lot of decisions that we make. But in the end, what about the user experience? How does the game feel? And is that something that the user is familiar with, and are we making something that the user is familiar with, and what are the important aspects in that to make it familiar for the expected user as an example. So the numbers and data are important, but those shouldn't be the number one thing that we're looking at when doing market research for our games. And there are a lot of reasons for that, which I'm going to be explaining within the coming slides as well. But the user experience, I think, is in the core of doing market research. And that affects basically, let's say, all areas of not only the game development itself, but the store page communication, your marketing communication, and everything is about the user experience. And that's like a big chunk of things that you will be doing. So why do some games fly without following any kind of best practices for making commercial games? I'm not, most likely I'm not the only one who has been like scratching their head and thinking like why this game sells, like why it is so popular, and it's very simple and the art style is shit, and the mechanics are even boring, and it's very repetitive content and such. I may not be the only one who has been thinking this question for some of the games that we see like being successful on Steam as an example. Like, what are the reasons for that? And I think like the main reason why games fly is obviously the user experience part, because were able to create something that had very approachable user experience, and it was easy to get going with the game and easy to understand it. And because of that, they decided to tell that game to their friends or such, or the algorithm did the rest when the game got a lot of players and such. But they ultimately it's about the user experience. Like back in the days, as an example, Flappy Bird. I'm not sure if anyone remembers Flappy Bird. It was taken down already, but got a huge popularity, even though it's a very simple and stupid game. But still, there's something in the user experience that they did back in the days, different than others, but in a way that was much more appealing than some of the games on the market, or a lot of games on the market. So the genre is everything in games, and I think that's main reasons also for the given topic is that, as I've mentioned in my previous presentations, that the genre is everything, and I've learned it through the hard way. The genre is not only for your game design, like how you make the actual game and such, but it's about actually understanding the genre. What are the user expectations when they start playing your game? Because that's already settled with your tags and such. The Steam, as an example, will suggest your game to players who have played those specific genres that you have tagged the game with. And if it's something unfamiliar for people, and people don't understand that what is this game and is it interesting for me, they won't buy it. Simple as that. So the tags determine what kind of a game you're making, and it should follow the best user experience standards of that specific genre. I will be repeating this to you most likely in almost every presentation and such, is that the user experience standards, because it's everything. Like if you start soloing with your game design and such, and doing everything from scratch and reinventing the wheel and such, you're making the game development much more harder for yourself, but also at the same time much more harder for the expected player to understand what the game is. Kinda, in the end, it's much more simpler than we may think, that how we pick our genre and how we do our game design. As game developers, we just tend to overcomplicate it. So user experience standards is things like what is the required quality? The quality, as an example, may be the graphical style. Like, is there hand-drawn worlds with a lot of different items and the kind of the menu systems and everything are top-notch and it's like high-quality content. In some genres, this is the expected, and usually those genres are the trending, not trending genres, the genres that are highly competitive, because in the highly competitive markets, also the big players are developing games. And when the big players are developing games for some specific competitive genre, the quality rises. So you don't want to be there as a small indie game developer, as an example, because you need to be hitting those quality standards. No one is gonna forgive you that it's bad quality because it's indie. Why would someone pay for the bad quality when they can get better quality with other games? So that's not an excuse to say that we made an action RPG game, but it's just much more worse than the competitors, but you should still play it. Like, no one will play it. So you need to actually find a genre that where the user experience hits the quality level that you can actually deliver. Same goes with the content. Is it 2 hours, 3 hours, 100 hours, or how much content you're planning on making? Highly depends on the standards and the user experience and the user expectations of that given genre. If you make an RPG game, as an example, which only has, let's say, a couple of hours gameplay, people will most likely refund it or leave a bad review because they expect it to be tens or maybe hundreds of hours content. Which leads also to the are we able to do all that within reasonable amount of time? So can we as a team actually do those, hit those user experience standards that are set for this specific genre, but also within reasonable amount of time? And the reasonable amount of time equals how much you need to sell to break even with the given game, which is obviously an interesting number if you're actually trying to make a living out of game development. That's, let's say, one of the main calculations that you need to be doing as well. Is the art style something we want to work with or leverage it, as an example? So because genres tend to have different kind of art styles or let's say at least art quality that is required from those games, and people expect that. And if in different genres the bar for that is set to different levels, what people accept as the art style, as an example. But also, that do you want to work with that? Like, if you have, let's say, 2 to 3 artists as an example, they must have their own, let's say, strong points and weak points. And if you go to the weak points of making a game, you are already making everything much more harder than you're supposed to be making. And most importantly, is the genre healthy commercial wise? But what does that mean? So healthy commercial wise, are there recent successes of what kind of games they are and what kind of games they are? So, and recent successes basically means everything, let's say, from year to a couple of days past. That are there games that have been successful and what kind of games they have been? Because those are your reference points in what you need to be making those successful games. Because if you make everything below that, you're most likely making under quality game. Is there a lot of similar games coming? So as an example, if you're making, let's say, a clicker game, you need to be digesting also the information that is there games coming within, let's say, to your release schedule, as an example, that are similar to the game that you're about to be making, because you don't want to compete with similar games. You will be losing a lot of sales if you go to the same time with some specific games that have similar mechanics and similar art style and such. Players will not be interested that much of your game because there is also an option to choose. And how other similar games have performed recently. Because it's easy to put your, let's say, uh, blue eyes blue eyes open and just look at the best selling games of that given genre and say that we can make that, but you're not looking like the other games that have failed, because there might be and most likely are a lot of games that are also been trying to replicate that successful game that was in the past, as an example, but they just didn't get any players at any point. So you also want to understand that are there already games even though they are not selling good, and what's the problem with those games. And then there's the word evergreen. And this is used in different cases, but in this case, evergreen means a genre or game mechanics that just remain evergreen. Like people who mechanics in games that are just existing throughout the history, and there's games being made for those evergreen genres or evergreen game mechanics, and people just want to digest those given evergreen mechanics and games like from year to year. But those games happen to be very often very competitive. So these games, these evergreen games, are games that show promising numbers but are in fact highly competitive. Which, as an example, if you look at the data of some specific evergreen games, you may kind of see that this is a very good selling genre or very good selling games and such. But if you dig deeper, you start to understand that the quality level, as an example, in these games are very high, which also means that the user expectations in that genre is very high. So if you're building an evergreen game, you are most likely fighting in the red ocean. And with games that are made in years and years with a big team and have a very high quality level. And the other option is that you follow trends. And trends are an interesting thing in game development. And we're actually going to be focusing more into the trend part of making games, because I personally find that trends are more interesting for small teams and solo game developers, as an example, than going for the evergreen games. Obviously, you can compete in the evergreen market, as an example, and try to make a game that is meet those standards. But as an example, for your first game or games, you should most definitely think of trying some specific trend that you have found from the market, as an example. I'm going to be showing my finding from Steam, that the trend that I picked, and I tell my reasoning for that in coming minutes or such. But the trends are, let's say, much less risky approach for making games than going for the evergreen games, because you need to be uh, working with the game for a very long time to meet those quality standards. And even though if you meet those quality standards, you still it's a lot of question marks that will the game sell and get a lot of visibility on the storefront and such, because most likely there are a lot of games being released at the same time which been already also been developed in a long period of time. So I think trends are more important for small teams. But the problem with trends is that those come and go. Trends can come and those can be there around year or maybe even less than that, and then they switch to something else. And combining that with game development, which usually take a lot of time, uh, it's a problem, because when you notice a trend and you think that we should be making a game for that specific trend, but before your game is complete, that trend may be already bite the dust. And because we cannot predict the future, it's very hard to determine that will this trend last, as an example. So it's also a problem. So we don't have the all-seeing crystal ball, but we do have data. And from data, we can understand a lot of things. But data also comes with the risk when you take a look, when you take a too close look into the data and take that as granted. So data can be your friend, but also lead you into a wrong direction, depending how you look at it. Like as an example, if you're not that experienced in looking at data and trying to understand what are the most important numbers for you and such, you may be focusing in the wrong things because you only try to use that data to convince yourself into making that game, but it's not taking in fact the account the actual reality how games sell and such. So using data may sound very professional, that we are looking at data and making our decisions and such. Yes, but how do you actually do that? What data points are actually interesting for you and important for the game's success, as an example? So the data shows us the direction, but not the outcome. And what this basically means is that even though if we get a very good understanding that these specific genres are very, let's say, promising, or this specific game is very promising and such, but in the end, you must actually make that game and follow those instructions that you have set to yourself. But very often, we developers still start soloing and making something whole different, and we are not following what the data shows us, and we make something totally different. As an example, if you're making a horror game on Steam, let's say the right approach is to make a underlined horror game. There is jump scares, there is blood, there is gore, and not that much of a, let's say, anything addition to that. But what developers do, they add a inventory system and character build system and story which you have to read through and such. But in the end, what the user was actually expecting was just jump scares and blood. So we just overcomplicate the design. And that's usually because we, as developers, we are very creative people and we want to use that creativity of ours to make something totally different. But what I've learned, and this is obviously my opinion, not any research on the fact or such, but I still think, like mentioned in the kickoff bootcamp as an example, that the players are actually very simple people. And depending on the genre, they may be actually very, very simple people. And that's what we're going to be looking at is the clicker genre as an example in a moment. But anyhow, we tend to overcomplicate the things, and because of that, the outcome is something totally different than the data showed us to make, as an example. So there's a lot of text on the screen. You don't have to read that through. I'm just listing the things that we are going to be looking next. And these are the problems that we basically listed just within the previous slides. So the problem is that we need a commercially healthy genre to build games for, but it's very hard to determine that healthy genre. The genre needs to be something that has a demand, but not too many games or too high quality standards. That's also a problem. How do we solve that? Evergreen games tend to be highly competitive, as an example, the action RPG games. So we cannot really make games for that either. So, which leads us to following trends, but seems like trends are also a problem because game development takes time, and trends come and go. So can we actually ship it on time? And we can look at the data and make assumptions, but it will only provide us direction. It won't specify the exact game we should be making. So those are the problems we have now for the market research. So now we try to solve that within a very concrete example of how to make market research for a game. Okay, so let's solve them with a very practical approach. So we need commercially healthy genre to build games for. And this is already, let's say, a big factor to try and understand it whole thing, because let's say the healthy genre is something like if you go to check and data, you will see that the action games are, as an example, the most healthy genre there because they're selling good, there's big numbers and so much of possibility. But at the same time, that is the most competitive market, which means that it is not healthy for you, but it's healthy for someone and most likely those bigger teams and bigger companies. So instead of looking for the best selling games, we should look into the most played games currently. And that's yet again my own opinion and my own approach for market research. So I'm not using data from, let's say, more than a year as an example. I'm more interested in the current situation of the markets and what people play right now, like today. What is the best performing game today? And I think that's more important, even more important for me because I'm obviously shipping a game each month. So it's kind of quote unquote easier for me to hit a genre that is trending currently because I can ship that within the month I discover that trend as an example. But for games that are in development for a longer period of time, you need to be, let's say, digesting the data in much more clear way because you need to understand the long lasting trends rather than the trends that only last for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or maximum of year or such, depending on your development cycle. How long does it take to actually accomplish that game that you're planning? So let's look at the clicker games because I'm currently, let's say, focused in the clicker games because it seems to be that clicker games are rather healthy right now, and there's a lot of room for small games. It's not, let's say, contested by big companies yet. It will be, most definitely, it will be because these numbers already show that there's a lot of room for big money. So the bigger companies will hit the clicker games sooner or later. But right now, if you already look at this list of games, there are, I'm not sure, is there any games that are so-called AAA or even AA. These are like made by very small teams or solo game developers. Basically, all of the games that are on in the most played list on the clicker games. That already explains a lot of the question marks that we had in the previous slides. Is that what genre we should be picking? And for this example, I think the clicker games are a very good example. So most played clicker games, there is, oh, it's not supposed to be pointing at banana. It's supposed to be pointing at bongo cat. But okay, so not banana, bongo cat. So let's take a look into that. The bongo cat game. So just to explain, I'm doing the market research right now. This is the market research. So I'm looking at the list of most played clicker games because I'm thinking of making a clicker game. And I first want to understand what is the most played clicker games right now. So let's take a look into the Bongo Cat. So it has enormous amount of reviews. It's good to take into account that the game is free to play. There's reviews. Some reviews I took from the Steam review section. And if you look at the amount of hours these reviews have been played, and these are actually below the average, this one is like more correct. So the hours played is like enormous for these games. And there's like a lot of mentions in the reviews, people saying that it's fun to connect with friends, but I think the uh, thing that repeated in the reviews is that people actually like to get all the achievements and sorry, there's a little echo from Jones. Heard my own voice for a couple of seconds. Lost my mind. So as an example, the goal has been reached. I finally reached 1 million bongs. So people actually want to do that. They want to collect everything and reach goals, which are, I don't know the numbers, but I guess that 1 million is a lot as an example, and looking at the hours. So I guess that is a lot. So people just want to get those achievements and those set goals that are in the game, and it's not asking a lot of, let's say, variety in the gameplay itself, but it's asking for that goals that the people can actually get and try to achieve. I actually feel like I will keep playing this after I 100% of the achievements, as an example, and people just want to get those achievements and go through it. So Bongo Cat was released on March 3rd, which is a little less than a year ago, when writing this as an example. That let's see if I show this presentation somewhere else. But it has a single player online co-op, Steve achievements, and it's free to play. And it's tagged as Cats free to play, clicker, cute, casual, idler, and 2D. And the players seem to enjoy trying to gather all the bongo cats and all the achievements. The gameplay itself includes a lot of AFK idling. So if you look at the numbers, let's go back a little. So the current number, as an example, is a lot. It's like the all-time peak is that, and currently, like it's close to the number of current. Like it has an enormous amount of people playing bongo cat. But yeah, so that explains also the amount of players for the play game is that it's a lot of AFK idling, but also that the game is free to play. That screenshot was from Steam DP, I'm pretty sure, yes. But one thing to mention is that the Bongo Cat is a borderless game. I'm not going to be digging into that yet, but I will be digging that in the coming slides. So keep that in mind. Bongo Cat is a borderless game. So the monetization of Bongo Cat seems to be rather warm and welcoming and totally optional. So the players can buy different cats and collect all things through gameplay. And they're also raising charity to increase the goodwill feeling of the game experience. So the kind of the monetization of the game is like very welcoming. There's no like paywalls in the game or anything that you actually need to buy, and it's also a cute game, and they're also raising charity. So there's a lot of like kind of a goodwill in the game, which also promotes the game in a good light, that people wanna digest that more because it doesn't feel like a money grab or something like that. So people are okay with idling in the game and such. So how this converts to money, this monetization model, I don't know. I didn't dig into that. The reason is in the next slide or such. So Bongo Cat type of game could easily achieve with a small team, but the problem with Bongo Cat and copying the success is that it's done already. And this kind of a game is, let's say, that unique that if you would be copying that idea, you would be making two similar games, which would, let's say, make yourself feel bad, but also maybe even, let's say, publicly make you look bad if you would be making something too similar to that. And the monetization is hard to compete because the game is already free to play, which means that a lot of players would be thinking that do they want to pay for a Bongo Guide type of a game, or do they just want to start playing it for free? So most likely a lot more people would pick the free one. So, and also the online functionality will increase the development time. So that's a little risky for a small team to take online functionality in the game because let's say it will increase the development time drastically, and Bongo Cat has online multiplayer features. So I think the next slide is wrapping it up. So Bongo Cat doesn't seem like a good pick. There's a lot of red flags for a small team, at least for myself, like as a solo game developer. There's too many red flags that I don't want to be taking that route. And I think the main thing is the free to play model and the monetization model, but also the online functionality that I don't want to compete with that. So with this in mind, let's try to look for a premium game that has no online functionality and without cats. So let's see if we can do that. So the number 2 point that we are solving here is that the genre needs to be something that has a demand, but not too many games or too high quality games. So let's keep that in mind. So now it's showing the right game this time. So the Tiny Pasture game, that is still on the list. It's bottom down, but if you're looking at the most played games, these numbers are very good, even though it's at the bottom of the list as an example. So Tiny Pasture is on the list, and let's try to understand that a little better. So it's an idler, cute farming sim, clicker, pixel graphics 2D game. A lot of reviews for the game, and it's premium game as well, so you need to pay to play it. And the reviews seem to be rather similar. People just want to collect them, feed them, very basic functionalities. And this one here, like great casual game to have in between tasks. I also play it while playing Overwatch 2 when I'm waiting for a group to queue up and things like that. So it's supposed to be a game that is on the background. It's not supposed to be a game where there is a lot of mechanics and such. It's supposed to be something that is run on the background, which is obviously a good news for a small team because the development time will be decreased because there's not much of a things that you need to, or the player don't want to even play. They just want to wait for the numbers to come. And that seems to be the thing in clicker games, obviously. And in Tiny Pasture, as an example, the reviews are positive because of that feature. So no, we don't want to make gameplay for such a game. We just want to make a game where you idle, you get points, and you can unlock stuff and get the achievements. So Tiny Pasture was released on February, so 1 month before Bongo Cat, which is also about a year ago. It's a idler, cute farming sim clicker, pixel and graphics, and 2D, and it is a borderless game. Yet again, if you don't know what is a borderless game, I learned that as well just recently, but I will explain that. A borderless game is a game that is that that is not on a window on your screen. You can put the game on beneath your toolbar in Windows as an example, and it will stay there, and you will see the animals like running next to your toolbar and your application windows and such, where they collect the items or whatever they're doing. So it's supposed to be a kind of let's say a background image that is animated, and you also get those points while running it. So it's basically on all the time that you just get those points. So that is a borderless game. There is no background image as an example. I think it's optional that you can put the background on if you like, but you can turn it off and then you can just put the window on bottom of your screen and that's it. So problem number 3 was that the evergreen games tend to be highly competitive. And I think like Tiny Pastures and Bongo Cat as an example are not evergreen games. And when taking into account the borderless functionality that is in the game, uh, which seem to be trending, but there's not many games in the borderless genre, if I may put it that way. So it's not evergreen. Borderless games seem to be a rather new genre. I wouldn't call that yet even a genre because it's not specified as such. But seems like there's games coming all the time where there is no, which are borderless, and people seem to enjoy those. So there is a audience forming for the trend of borderless games. So it's a clear new trending mechanic which players are looking for. And because it's so specific, like you can understand from the trailer pretty fast that yes, this is borderless game like Bongo Cat or Tiny Pasture or such. So I can actually put it on bottom of my screen and there's some new things that I collect there and new achievements that I get. It's like instantly already clear for the player that what is he expecting from such a game. It has a clear gameplay loop. It's also simple to develop. So following trends. So this is a trend. right now borderless games are a trend. It's not a big trend, but it's asking also that how much, let's say, buck are you planning on making from your game? If you're a small team or solo game developer like I am, the kind of amount of income that you need to be making from the game is much more less than from a big studio, as an example. And because of this, big studios are not making borderless games because it's not that big of a market for them, but it's a big enough market for small teams and also for solo game developers. So borderless games are a trend, but we just need to verify that in some way. And we also want to understand like what is good data and have some kind of a reference points to understand like and predict that will this be a thing. And obviously there are many ways to do that, but yet again it highly depends on your goal, how much of a units you're planning on selling of that game, and how much of let's say proof do you need that this is a market that we can actually pay our salaries and such. So but we need a reference data to understand what is good and what is bad data. So I'm going to be taking my own game here as a reference. So the buttons up, there are the numbers for buttons up. And for buttons up, I'm saying the game generated enough revenue. It's 1,600 right now. And that's enough for me because I made the game in 2 weeks. So that's a break even uh, for me already. And it's been out for less than a month. So there's a lot of more income coming from the game, and not sure where it will settle, but my guess would be something around 300 or something like that. Uh, but anyhow, this is our reference data, and I'm just circling that number here because just keep that in mind. The 64 followers on store as an example. But this is the reference data. So are we able to ship it on time? The game? Like, will the trend go away before that? Was one of the problems. So most of the upcoming borderless games are scheduled to be released after the Q1 2026. I browsed through the Steam and Steam DP and took a different kind of a sites where I just manually browsed for games that are gonna be released and that has the borderless features implemented. And right now it seems that most of the games are coming out on after Q1, and my release window is the end of February or at the start of March. So I'm not worried about that. There's not too many games coming for the borderless games, and I'm kind of convinced that this is good numbers. So there's coming a game, Desktop Fishing Cat. Obviously, no one has heard about the game and such, but it's coming late March. So even though it's coming late March, I have already shipped my game before that. So how does Desktop Fishing Cat work right now on Steam? And we like noticed we have the 64 followers with buttons up right now, and the game Fishing Cat has already 70 followers, and it's ranked in the wishlist activity, which means that there are good amount of people expecting for Desktop Fishing Cat to be released. Not many, like it's not big numbers in these, but yet again, my team is very small. It's me. So reaching the numbers like buttons up is already enough for me. And it seems like these desktop borderless games are something that people are expecting when looking at the Fishing Cat, Desktop Fishing Cat game as an example. That the game has a wishlist rank, even though it's a big number, but it has the rank. It's already proving a lot that there will be people waiting for the given game. So most likely there will be people interested in seeing another borderless games being released before uh, Desktop Fishing Cat, as an example. These may sound like small numbers and such, but it's still numbers that are like in a very practical way, showing us that there are, let's say, possibility in the given genre that the trend will follow and people are expecting that kind of a games in the future. When thinking of Bongo Cat and the what was the other game, the Pastures game, uh, those have been released a year ago, and there's still no, let's say, competitors for the given games. But this year, there's gonna be a lot of borderless games coming. What I looked at the different sites, that there will be a lot of borderless games coming, but not right now. So I think the release window for my game will be maybe good. But if I would be shipping my borderless game by the end of this year, it may already be too late, as an example. So depending on your development cycle, you need to be seeing trends that you have proof that will last until your game is finished, or you may lose the train. So borderless games seem promising, and I wanted to point that out that for solo game developer, because yet again, it's not for big companies, it's not for big teams. Even let's say 10 people are too many for borderless games. But depending on your goals, how much of units you need to be selling to break even with your development, that is the number you should looking at. And for me, these yet small borderless games seem to be enough. So yet again, this data and everything, we can make these assumptions, but it will only provide us a direction. It won't specify the exact game we should be making. But now we at least have some proof and some understanding, or I have, for the game 6, that this could be something. But now I do have the data, but how will I actually execute the given game and get that into hit the quality standards that people are expecting? I don't even know how to make a borderless game yet, but hopefully I will know by the end of February. But still, it's something that I'm more interested in trying out because I want to see that does these numbers match. Right now, it seems that there is a big chance that these numbers match, but still, it's about the game itself. Am I able to, let's say, browse the existing games and existing borderless games and such and understand what people expect from those and stick my plan around those features rather than soloing and doing something totally different? So it leads to the study, and that is something that I'm gonna be doing within the coming weeks and such, is to understand the art style. What is the best choice for the art style for the game? Like what people are expecting and what they want to see in borderless games. It could be the pixel art, maybe, but also it may be risky to make a pixel art game because it's already been made. So maybe that is one way to differentiate, is to make some different art style than pixel graphics. The mechanics most likely will be very familiar that are in the existing games, but I obviously want to make some twist for the mechanics when I start to understand more of that given genre and what could be interesting and such. But one thing I need to remember is that the players are expecting that idle gameplay. I took a look into the bad reviews of Tiny Pastures as an example, and the bad reviews were mostly people saying that there's too many things I need to do. It's not an idler game. So yet again, like people want it to be idle game that you don't do that much in there. So that's what I need to remember doing the development, not to go overboard with the mechanics and things you need to do. It's an idle game. But also the store page communication, because I need to understand how these kind of games are promoted, how they are explained in a way that the players who like to play borderless games, they understand that this is a borderless game. So I need to be taking a closer look into the store pages of those existing games, how they have put those in the words. And like mentioned, the reviews, those are important. Obviously, there's a lot of crap in the reviews, but there's also when you go through all the reviews and such, you start to understand the repetitiveness, like the things that people just want to say out loud all the time and all over again. The same things, what was nice in the game and what was bad in the game. Like obviously, single review won't count anything, but when you have like 15 to 20 reviews saying the same thing, you most likely want to take that into account. And obviously, I'm gonna play the games and see how those actually function in practice, and how the little things like the user interface, how it is shown there, and how many buttons are there on the screen, and what those buttons do, and what kind of options the game have. Like, is there some systems that need to be turned off or on? Like people want to do that and such. So I need to actually play those and see what kind of things they're offered. And obviously, when I play through the games, there still may be a moment that I understand that this may not be a good choice of genre that I would be making. I'm not sure what could be the reason, but obviously there can be a reason, and I most likely think that the reasons could be something for the mechanics that I'm thinking that I cannot do that, or it's too complicated, or it takes too much time or such. But right now, to me, it seems that it's a rather easy genre to make games for. At least when I solve the technical issue of making those borderless games, I still don't know how to do that, but hopefully within time I will. But also adding those things that I personally find as interesting or the missing spice of that genre. I have obviously no clue what those could be, but once I played those through and look at the reviews and especially the bad reviews and such, I may be understanding like what people want more for the given genre. Like as an example, the buttons up game, there was people saying on the Incridizer reviews that the game was good, but I wanted that I could play the game again and get some unlocks. So I did that feature for buttons up that you can play the game through, and for the next playthrough you have something new unlocked. So then I implemented that feature and put the game out, and people are writing good reviews because they like playing the game again and again, as an example. I personally don't know why. Like, yet again, I mentioned this earlier as well. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't play buttons up all over again because it's such a boring game for myself. I wouldn't be doing that. But the players of that given genre want to do that. And that's our kind of responsibility as game developers to understand the players, what they demand from different genres of games, and what are their expectations. So this time we have 7 minutes for questions and such. That's a very practical and simply put um, explanatory of my approach. Obviously, I need to be, let's say, uh, realistic here and say that there was a lot of different kind of work that I did. I put it very simple here to have it done within an hour of presentation. But that's still in a nutshell. It's not that complicated, at least for myself, how I do the market research and such. You may get overwhelmed with all the data that you're supposed to be looking at and such, but in the end, if you keep your eyes on for the let's say past 6 months or 1 year and the games that are currently played on Steam as an example, it makes much more easier for you to start understand what kind of games are currently interesting for the players. But please, so thank you, but please ask questions and give your thoughts and ideas and whatever you have. But that's a wrap for the official part of the presentation.